Hello, everybody. Welcome back to your Monday Morning Jumpstart. We are back with Ted Capshaw jumping up and down. Hi, Ted.
Jumping up and down, yeah. The journey of self, right? Well, I want to start off today by bringing some sort of gravity to what
Okay.
we're talking about.
Okay, so
And
you want
here's
to
what I
remind
mean.
everyone what we're talking about if they haven't listened to the
Yeah,
last couple of weeks?
we're talking about last week we talked about the journey of self. Like when we Jade and I on these Monday morning jump starts, what we said before is leadership, business, this writing entrepreneurship journey is a journey of self as much as it is anything else. And we distinguish between you put a lot of effort into this, building your business acumen, building your skill set. You learn certain niche writing, white paper writing, website writing, whatever it may be. Um, and as Jade quoted last week, look, we talk about that stuff a lot, and we put a lot of effort into that stuff. And what I'm proposing is that we need to equal that out with as much effort on self and the deep emotional work, because oftentimes what we don't see, this is a real example. We use it as a very general example last week, but it's a very real example for many people. Why am I not getting clients?
Mhm.
Well, they're blaming it on their writing, they're blaming it on this, they're blaming it on their marketing, they're blaming it on anything. And a closer look from a business or leadership coach myself would quickly not diagnose the problem of you getting clients as your skill in writing or whatever. It would be self. It would be your insecurity of presenting yourself, or your fear of not picking up the phone and calling somebody to present your value. And then we
Yes.
have to back into that and start doing the work around getting out there, so you're coming out into the world a little more bold,
Yes.
right?
Bold.
Which would then lead into confidence. I The words that I always put around this is the outcomes is bold, convicted, you know, secure,
Yes.
right? All those different things. And I don't want other people creating that. I want us to do the self-discovery and work. And so what we said at the end of call last week was that we'll get on this week and just give you a starting point, right? Like questions to ask yourself.
Hmm.
And one of the questions, I presented last week and I just said, one of the questions I use in coaching oftentimes, and it's not really understood by many until we get further down the road, is what are your insecurities? And, this is what I meant by I want to start here, because when I ask questions about what are your insecurities, oftentimes people start getting lost. And I said it last week that they're like, oh, Ted's taking us to therapy. And and honestly, Jade, people make jokes about that, right?
Hmm.
Oh, there goes Ted. Bring out the Kleenexes, and and in business, in the corporate setting, people make jokes about it until they're in trouble,
Mm.
until they can't get clients, or until they've had people quit on them, whatever. And then all of a sudden they're coming back to me and they're saying, "Oh, that stuff that you were talking about, right? Now it's all coming to a head." And they're on. So what I wanted to begin by saying is, we are in a business conversation today.
Hmm.
I want to make that crystal clear to people. We're having a business conversation, and I'm just coming in with something that I think is critical to business, which is yourself,
Hmm.
your development of self and understanding of who you are and how that plays into the growth. The word that
Hmm.
Jade used at the end of our last week, the growth of your company, the growth of your entrepreneurship, right? And so, a starting point for me is always, what's your story? And that's just a big old question for many people. But what I want people to start to explore is that, here's what I say, Jade. Through self exploration, what you will find is, we are all just a manifestation of our life's journey.
Hmm.
That's what we are, right? And there are things that that have absolutely served us well and that are contributing to our success and that are supporting us out in the world because of this experience and as it's manifested itself. And then there's other parts of us that have really we haven't identified, but they're showing up in the world and they're not serving us well. And
Hmm.
we've minimized them. We've said things like, well, that's just me. How many of us
Yes.
have said that?
Yes.
Well, that's just the way I was raised.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we say all those different things. Well, that's where the work comes in,
Hmm.
because now we have to start to figure out, and this is the starting point that I talked about last week. We have to start to figure out What have we given credit to
Mhm.
that we should no longer be giving credit to? Because we've all done that. With the word, people have heard me talk a lot about my dad. I realized only about 11 or 12 years after my dad was gone that I was giving him credit for some of my authentic thoughts.
Mm,
And the reason I was doing that is because I didn't think people
exactly.
would believe it was me. Well,
Yeah,
no, but if I told them that my late father, who was a
exactly.
PhD and a college president, said it, then it had more weight.
Yes, yes, yes,
So I'm
100%.
giving credit to something back. So I want you to see, and sometimes we minimize things because we say, well, that's just the way I'm raised and that stuff. So a starting point for me is start to figure out those things that we're so rooted in. Which ones of them support us? What's of those experiences support us? Which ones are we just telling ourselves like that's just me? And honestly, nobody's come to you and held you on the hook to go, that's BS. That's not just you.
100%.
You're choosing to say this
Yes,
is this is just
yes.
me. Like the example that I use, which many people could relate to, unfortunately, is divorce,
Yeah.
right? And I say, later in life, a man or a woman says, "Well, I never had the example to know what it's like to be in a marriage or know what it's like to love," and I'm like, and therefore I've never had been in a successful relationship, and I'm like, I'm not buying that. Like, I'm sorry,
Yes.
sincerely sorry that you didn't have the example, but you could choose to do the opposite or at least try things
Exactly.
to do something different. It's the same thing. Well, let me start. I don't want to get too far ahead. Here's what I want people to start to consider. If you were to look back at your life, there are times or things that have happened that clearly have defined certain things. It defines your behaviors, it defines your insecurities, it defines your belief systems,
Yes.
it defines certain things. And there are ones that I want you to double down on because they are going to work for you and they're going to keep you at base camp. And then there's other ones that have created deep insecurities in you or belief systems that don't serve you well or business practices that are rooted in fear, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the starting point of that. Now we got to
Mhm.
rearrange things in your behaviors, rearrange things in your thinking, rearrange the way you approach certain things. And that's the work that we got to start to do. We can't start the work until you become aware.
Mhm.
This
Mhm.
awareness piece is really the starting point. Like when I started to realize, I'll give this example and I'll pitch it over to you, Jade.
Mhm.
You know, I I was transracially adopted and grew up in a primary white. That insecurity led into being in front of the room and being the only black guy and doing whatever. This is just me being as real as I can be.
Mhm.
The reason I'm going here is because I need you, Jade, and anybody else listen, to get as real with yourself as you need to get. The reality is, and then when I got in front of people out in corporate America, I found myself in a very similar position as I was when I was young. And then all of a sudden, I was presenting myself completely out of my skin, trying to articulate my words different, trying to talk about what I thought they thought was going to be most
Reality.
important,
Yes.
not what the value that I was willing to bring and should be bringing, and my strengths and my boldness and my conviction was all lost because I was trying to button it up and explain. And so I had to explore that.
Mhm.
I had to explore, like, dang, like here I am in that same dang rhythm because of the wounds that I had, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then going back to some of the things that were rooted in me from my parents and doubling down on them, all the wonderful things that were instilled in me. But that took exploration. And you said last week, the journey of, I'm still on that journey.
100%. Never ends. Never ends. Ted,
So
I was
that's where I wanted to take that this week, is just give people a starting point and give more context around. And the word awareness is really what I want to bring to the table.
so two things that come to mind. First off, I was very lucky I think I met her when I was in the fifth grade, my best friend growing up. And I didn't realize until we were older, she had every reason to turn out like a complete loser. Her parents had her, I think, 19, separated when she was 2, tumultuously fought even when they were separated. There was drug use. There was the stepmom that like tried to banish her, like
Oh,
almost like Cinderella vibes, you know what I mean? Yet she still remains one of the sweetest, purest, nicest people. And so growing up with that, anybody that came in and somebody was like, oh, they're like that because of that, I'm like, BS, because that is complete nonsense. Because I know somebody that grew up worse than that and is still the sweetest, nicest person, but you're allowing that behavior because of that story, right? So it's like
Yeah.
that's a part of like the stories that we tell ourselves. And then when you were talking, I realized that I've done something in my life that I didn't till this moment even realize that I've done. So coming over here very young and like going through like a lot of nonsense as well, like to get to a certain place, people would always ask, like, how did you get over here? Like, what happened? Like, so asking me, what's your story, basically.
Yeah.
And I got so tired, Ted, of being the victim of that story that I completely flip the narrative, the same story, but flip the narrative to where I am the hero of my story, right? And
Yeah.
it's not nonsense. There's no falseness to it. But I wonder if that's like a great exercise. So like people can be like everything that happened to them and that's their story and that feels like that the reasons why you could be the victim, but not change it to like the reasons why you are the hero, right? The same with what you just
Yeah.
discussed. You have every reason, Ted, to be the victim of your story. There's not one thing that you mentioned that would be anybody would think twice for you to be the victim of your story. But you, despite that, are the hero of your story. Because of that, are the hero of your
Yeah.
story. You know? So it's like almost like taking that thing that could bring you down and turning that into like the reason why you are so amazing, the reason why you're going to go after this even harder. Like using that as like a stepping stone and not a boulder, like to knock you over. I feel
Yeah.
like it's so empowering and can completely change the way that you act and operate and treat yourself. And it's like that way you talk about powerful and bold. You go into the conversation like, you know what? This stuff happened, and because of that, I am this, and I was able to do this, and then I decided I'm going to learn this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go after this. And you tell me that
Yeah.
people won't be attracted to that and amazed by that. So I'm not saying you should falsify any of your story. I'm not diminishing any
Well, there's
tough or
yeah.
hardship, but be the hero of your story.
Yeah. The reason we're starting at awareness is because the ultimate outcome is to be the hero of the story. And there's two
Yeah.
things that I'd add to what you're saying. The first is that we can't skip steps. So unfortunately, we're not simply talking about a mindset shift here,
Yes.
right? We're
True.
not talking
Very
about
true.
that happened to me and therefore I'm going to look at it. I recently wrote something on LinkedIn that somebody said, the premise of the article that I contributed to was talking about failure and how we just failure is really not failure. It's just an obstacle and it's just a lesson. And I get that thinking, but here it has to do with what I'm talking about right now. It's failure.
Yes.
If you failed at something, you failed at something. The question is, are you going to slow down enough to really understand what you did wrong to self-correct and et cetera, et cetera. It's the same thing here. The reason we're starting with awareness is that I want you to start to become self-aware, but there's going to be work in between. It's not going to be like an A to B type
Yep.
thing. You're really going to have to start to catch yourself. This is the real life learning stuff. Catch yourself. Okay, so I said I get in front of people. Well, what's my preparation to get in front of people? My preparation look like different? What am I going to do differently to present differently? Like
Mhm.
there's real work to be done there. It's not like it's
100%.
just a mindset shift. I'm coming from a
No, no,
different
no. I
place.
just
Like
do
that.
it. I
It's
just do it.
yeah,
No, no, no.
no, it's not that. This is why we're saying a starting point would be to become aware of this stuff. That's number
Yes.
one. Number two, equally as important, because when we get into conversations like this, me included, by the way, we often go to the hardships, right? And I want you to become self-aware of that. Here's what I also want to bring into play. The example that I'll use that many people come to me is I don't really explore who I am, or because I grew up, I didn't have many problems. Both my parents are still alive. I grew up in a middle class family. I didn't want for anything. These are all things I hear all the time. And I'm like, well, dang, well, then tell me what lessons you learned. And they start getting into it. And I'm like, well, why aren't you sharing that? Or why aren't you doubling down on those things? And are you leading from that? Are you presenting yourself from those lessons?
Mhm.
Or have you just migrated into what the world is present? You know what I mean? Like, so really understand that there's two things here. Because
Mhm.
sometimes we say, I don't want to belabor it. So let's not get lost and get mired in the hardships as much as becoming really aware of what you're in. Because I think what you're going to find is that there's some things right in front of you that maybe you've forgotten. that would serve you
Yes.
very well very well in business. You will
Yes.
remember a time that you overcame something that was a huge win in
Yes.
your life, or you'll remember a time that was so positive, or you'll remember the affirmation that a parent gave you, or that, you know, eighth grade teacher gave you, and you felt so powerful. Those are the things that we want to tap into
Yes.
that are in your way. And so, look, gang, this is about a starting point. You know, we could parlay this conversation into many different things. This is about emotional intelligence. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence in business, becoming more self-aware of your emotions and how they, because emotions equal behaviors and actions. This is a
And
starting point,
reactions.
and reactions. So this is a starting point to just becoming more aware of this. This is all we've talked about it the last couple of episodes. This journey of self has everything to do with business. And you just got to start figuring out how. You know, your past experiences, even your present experiences. You bring in work. Some people say, well, at my last job, anytime that I was bold or I brought up new ideas, they were squandered. And well, guess what? Now they're not bringing up new ideas to potential clients because that was their experience. So now they've been muffled. But have you become aware of that? And what are you doing to change the approach now? Again, that's just a manifestation of an experience out in the work world, out in corporate America. We've all had those experiences in corporate America that have shaped the way we're showing up today, trying to build this writing career. And we have to figure out what they are, which ones serve us, and which ones are prohibiting us from really bringing our full self.
The permission to leave those behind that are no longer serving you. There's
Yeah.
no reason to carry them along with you. Nobody,
No.
nobody needs them. No one needs them.
No. No.
So do you think again, first step is awareness, Ted? Where do we want to, because this is
The
another big
first,
one.
go back and think about things, right, in your life, right, and patterns that you have, or things that you could even look at your right now. What are your biggest obstacles in your business right now
Mm,
under this bucket of self, and then try to figure out where they came from,
yeah,
right? What work you need to do around them.
yeah.
And we can get into that. It becomes a very personal journey after that, Jade.
Yes,
I would feel almost cheap trying to talk in very general terms here. That's why
yes,
I coach a lot of people on individual journeys here, because I mean, I had to make very specific pivots to, in very practical ways, not just mentally, in very practical ways, to take different approaches to business or presenting or giving a talk on stage or coaching people, because of the awareness that I had. It was a very personal journey. So
yes.
I do think for everybody it's going to be a little bit different, but the awareness piece, understanding, looking back at really how have you developed into who you are today? What are the biggest obstacles that present to you? I happen to believe, knowing the AWAI membership, the crew out here, that this insecurity, this fear of approaching clients is one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
Where'd that come from? Is it really because you think your writing's not good, or where is it coming from, some other
Mhm.
part of self?
And the reason the place I thought you were gonna go there, because I was gonna say I was thinking this. Like they were also talking to writers, and I don't know about you, Ted, but I find just writing down the question, like you're saying, like what is stopping me? What is my biggest insecurity? Where you just write those, you'd be shocked at what comes out. Like, instead of just sitting thinking these things in your thought, I would employ everyone to start writing them down. And it also allows you to track growth. It's a brilliant tool, and I think this is a great place where you can use it.
Yeah.
So your superpower as a writer, use it for yourself. And then I think it's so true when you said once you discover those things, so individualized. I would highly recommend, once you have, like, what is the best next step for you? Is it a therapist? Is it meditation? Is it movement, yoga, gym? Find something that's your thing, because not one thing works for everyone, and it helps like move those blockages and those chains forward to this growth that we're
Yeah.
talking about. Because it's so true what you said. It's not just a just go do a thing. It's not just a overnight thing. You got to
No.
find your cure almost, to overcome and
Yeah.
to move forward. So
Yeah.
good. Woo,
Repetition.
Ted,
Yeah.
these are some big topics, everybody. So obviously go back, listen, digest, take some time, absorb, write, do whatever you need to. And then Ted, we might be rounding up with one of the biggest of all, which is regret. So I'm going to get to that next week and we shall see everyone then. Appreciate you, Ted, very much. I'll see you there.